What is going on, Cultiv8 family? I hope you are all doing well today, wherever it is that you're listening to this from. A lot of new faces around here, especially on YouTube since the last podcast. I don't know if it was the subject matter, but whatever it is, I'm really glad it resonated. And if you've come back to listen again this week, I appreciate you a lot and welcome. Welcome to the Cultiv8 family. It's absolutely not a cult. And now I've said that, it kind of sounds like it is, but I promise you it's not. So last week we went in depth as to why people with ADHD are more likely to struggle. And we spoke about how 3/4 of people with ADHD struggle to fall asleep quickly. Most of us struggle to actually stay asleep once we've got to sleep. 80% of us have trouble waking up on time. And 75% of adults with ADHD report that their minds restlessly move from one concern to another for several hours until we just conk out. And even then, we continue to wake up, toss and turn, and sometimes we barely sleep at all. We also covered what good sleep hygiene actually looks like for everyone, not just neurodiverse people. So if you haven't listened to part 1 yet, go back and listen to that first, because today we're getting into part 2 and we're going to talk about best practices for ADHDers that need to get their sleep. So all of us. And I'm going to also talk about a formula that could potentially help people, which is almost like a prompt to ensure that you're able to wind down as best as you can. Now, in the past couple of weeks, I've spoken to so many of you in the DMs on Instagram, and I only found very, very few of you with ADHD that said that you never, ever had issues sleeping on or off your medication. And sometimes that's often caused you to even question that you have ADHD. And that was really interesting because normally when I put a bit of a call out to ask about people's personal experience and stories, I get so many replies. And when I put a call out to be like, who has ADHD and does sleep well? The ratio of people that replied that normally would was so minimal. So it just shows that this is something that so many of us struggle with. For those of you that don't struggle with sleep, you don't even need to listen to this. I am so jealous, but hey, maybe you'll get a few tips if you are anyway. So last week, we obviously spoke about what good sleep hygiene looks like for everyone. And this week we are getting more specific. So we ended the podcast last week, and I think I mentioned that if your sleep hygiene is fully in check and you're still struggling to sleep, it might be that you need some trial and error and a few little techers to find something that works well for you. And that's what we're going to start talking about. So I have a bunch of things here that have been proven to help people with sleep, and they're not necessarily going to work for everyone, and it's all going to be trial and error. So anything that maybe resonates or anything that you haven't tried, give it a go. Now, the first point here is that if you are going to try and change something about your sleep cycle or your sleep-wake routine, we want to change things in small intervals. So if you're trying to change the time you go to bed, don't go in hard and change your bedtime from 2 a.m. to 10 p.m. straight away. Do it in 20 to 30 minute blocks. So if, for example, you're always going to bed at 2 a.m. and you don't always want to do that because it's not optimal for your work life, start going to bed at 1:30 a.m. for a while. When you've done a week of that, change it to 1, and so on until you get to the time you want. And it goes for those who want to wake up earlier as well. If you always struggle to wake up and you're not getting up till 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, work backwards and get up earlier, maybe 5 to 10 minutes every day. So a little bit less extreme, because the mornings can be a lot harder for people, especially people with ADHD. Now, the second practice would be looking into relaxation exercises, deep breathing, or meditation. Now, this immediately might sound really unattractive to so many of you. To be fair, it has done for me so many times. But if you find something that works, it can be a really good prompt to sleep. And we're not necessarily wanting to use meditation for loads and loads of mindfulness. We're actually wanting to use it to try and let our minds wander and calm down a little bit. So best practice for using like breathing exercises or a guided meditation, try it consistently for 2 weeks. Do it every single day, show up and do it even when you don't want to. And by the end of that 2 weeks, is it starting to help? If it is, then it's definitely worth maybe pursuing that for a full month. Journaling, keeping a bit of a log of how your sleep is, And if by the end of that point, it is working, amazing, you know it's something that you're going to want to keep around long term. If you try it consistently for 2 weeks, a month, and it's having no effect on you, no worries at all. Put it straight in the bin. As long as you've tried something consistently for a period of time and it's not for you, it's not to say it might not be for you in the future, but right now it's not working. So it's okay to say that you've tried it and move on. And that goes for any of the things that I'm going to talk about today. Next up, we're going to talk about tech cutoff time. Now, again, this isn't the most attractive because often we'll be awake on an evening and we'll be off dopamine hunting. We'll be on TikTok or Reels or YouTube. But having a solid boundary and a cutoff time to put away your phone, turn off your TV shows or stop playing video games, think about what you can do instead that's going to be a little bit more relaxing and not as stimulating. So non-screen activities like podcasts, like audiobooks, like reading. For a lot of us, we might struggle to actually concentrate on reading a book. So a podcast or an audiobook that isn't super interesting, potentially something that we've read before or listened to before, can be really calming because we're not necessarily getting lots of things from it and like, oh, that's interesting. I want to hear more about that because it's something that we're familiar with. And where I'm going to now conflict everything that I've said here, a lot of us have comfort TV shows, and a lot of people will choose to fall asleep to a comfort TV show. So although the phone might be going out of the room, you might leave a comfort TV show playing on your iPad in the corner of the room, and that might slowly help you shut off and go to sleep. And although you're not watching the screen, you're maybe using the audio because it's familiar to you and it's calming. So for me, as all of you will know, apart from maybe some of you newcomers, that is Grey's Anatomy for me. It's my comfort show. It's my security blanket. It chills me out. It calms me down. With the amount of trauma in that show, I'm sure you're going to question why, but there we go. I love it. I'm actually getting a Grey's Anatomy tattoo in a couple of weeks as well. Anyway, tangent. But definitely think about audio when it comes to trying to wind yourself down without the presence of the screen. And the other thing here is, if you have a tech cutoff time, think of a non-screen activity that you might be able to do. So for some people, that could be doing something with your hands, like crafting, knitting. It could be like Lego. Love the adult Lego. Or it could be something like playing a board game. All of these things are going to stimulate your brain a little bit, but not in a way that you're getting those quick hits of dopamine. So think about a tech cutoff time. Set that boundary, try it, see if it helps. Think of something familiar or something that you're not that bothered about. So you can listen to it, but you could slowly zone out and nod off in the background without becoming wired from the subject matter in a sense. So I would never really listen to like a nutrition or a fitness podcast when I go to sleep because I will start getting all sorts of ideas for Fuzz Culture Club, for content ideas. But one thing that I really enjoy winding down with is like interviews with musicians. And for all of you that know me, like music is a huge part of my life. And, you know, winding down to somebody talking about music, I found really calming and not necessarily too stimulating. So the next practice we're going to talk about that we have in our control to help us sleep is climate control. Now, obviously we can only control this to an extent, but you want to fall asleep in a cool room, offset by having a very warm and cozy bed. The reason is that grounds the body and it makes you more inclined to stay in that bed. So like optimum temperatures for your room to be are 16 to 19 degrees Celsius, and that's 60 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit for all our people that use Fahrenheit. So obviously you can't necessarily get out a thermometer and measure your room. But if, for example, you have the heating on or you have the aircon on and it's either too hot or too cold, that is technically going to affect your sleep. So definitely think about that. Have the temperature of the room nice and cool. Have your bed warm and cozy, but not too warm. So moving on from climate control, let's now talk about light. So the room wants to be dark. And again, this might be beyond your control if you're in like rented accommodation and you don't have very good blinds or curtains. However, having an eye mask could be a game changer for you. So make sure you're falling asleep, your blinds and your curtains are shut. Make sure you dim your lights from clocks or like other electronic devices, and use an eye mask to block out all the light. That is going to be a much better environment for sleep than you being able to see a street lamp peering in through your blinds or waking you up at a certain time in the morning when the sun comes up. Now, aside from temperature of the room and the light in the room, we now want to start thinking about external cues. And when I say external cues, I mean things that will associate your body and your mind with the fact that it's time for you to go to bed, which is a thing that a lot of us are going to struggle with. So a few examples here is like having a warm bath or a shower and associating that as an activity that you do at the end of the day before bed every night. Because that means when you get in that shower or you get in that bath, you know it's time to chill out. It's not time to start thinking about all the stuff you're going to do tomorrow, how many funny memes that you got sent that you haven't checked out yet, and how much washing you need to do tomorrow. Your mind is going to know that when you get in that bath or get in that shower, that's where you go before sleep. So the repetitive habit of that is going to allow that mindset to adjust. Other examples here can be using like a sound machine or having some chill out music. If you have light bulbs that you can dim in the evening after you've had dinner. So again, slowly just bringing in a more relaxing vibe to your environment. Another one is actually getting changed into what you wear to sleep. And that can help shift the mind and the body closer to sleep mode. So on the back of these external cues that we use to help us go to sleep, we should also be thinking about the external cues where our body is going to know that it's time to be awake and to be working. Because as people with ADHD, we struggle with our internal clock and our circadian rhythm. So we want daytime cues as well as nighttime ones. So daytime cues might be bright lights, it might be a cool shower in the morning, waking up and having breakfast. And this is also why eating regularly throughout the day at similar times can be handy for our sleep-wake routine. One external cue prompt that I have seen so much in all the research I did for these episodes was only use your bed for sleep and sex. Don't eat in it, don't work from it, don't watch Netflix in it if you're able to. So if you have separate rooms where you live and you're able to compartmentalize where you sleep, use that bed for sleep or sex. That's it. Everything else gets done somewhere else. And then you only associate that bed with those activities. Now, last couple of practices, things that we can try when we're trying to improve our sleep. Don't stay in bed too long. If it's taking you longer than half an hour to fall asleep, it's way better to get up and out of bed. So I've read a few studies this week that talk about just standing up in the dark, which seems really weird, kind of psychopath vibes. But the principle of this is if you're laid in bed and it's taking you ages to get to sleep, you're getting frustrated and you're actively thinking, I've got to get up in 6 hours, I've got to get up in 5 hours. The best thing you can do is just to stand up out of your bed and exist. And that's not fun, especially not for someone with ADHD. We would find that so boring, just standing in a dark room out of our bed, which will eventually get you to the point where you do want to be back in bed. And weirdly, people have found a lot of great success with that, strangely. Now, I haven't actually tried this yet. If you try it, please do let me know if it helped. And then the next thing we want to talk about is no snoozing. So when you hit snooze on your alarm, when you're in that light sleep, it isn't deep and it's not restorative. So if you're snoozing a lot in the morning, you might actually decide you want to put your alarm somewhere where you have to get out of bed to turn it off, because you snoozing is not actually doing you any favors. You're not technically being well rested because you keep snoozing your alarm because it keeps waking you up. I am hugely guilty over this, and my partner gets so angry when I keep snoozing my alarm. And then the last practice that I think is worth a lot of us thinking about is physical activity. So a lot of us will find that if we went to the gym at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, we might end up feeling really wired and stimulated and find it really hard to wind down. But some of us may find that going to the gym last thing or doing physical activity last thing on an evening actually kind of wears us out a little bit more. And I don't know if you would agree, but when I'm in the gym or when I'm training, my brain is just ticking and it's just going a million miles an hour and I just let it. So physical activity for me, I actually think this is the one thing that may be helping improve my sleep, is doing a little bit of something on an evening. So that's actually what I've been trying. So the last week since I started planning and researching this podcast, I've been doing a little bit of cardio directly before bed. Now, for me, that's just involving hopping on my bike and doing a very low intensity cycle for about 40 minutes with YouTube or some music on in the background. I then have my tech cut off time. I then shower and get straight into bed. Now, I've not been doing it consistently, so I can't tell you the results just yet, but I think potentially this could be an option for the way that my brain works for sure. So if you are someone that really hates going to the gym after work or first thing in the morning, do you have it in you to do a bit of a later session? And could that potentially help? It's definitely worth a try. You might find it might make you more wired, but if it doesn't, it could just be the thing that helps you get off nicely to bed. And I think the other thing about introducing some movement is obviously that's energy expenditure. So that's doing a form of something that's working your body. So again, that is going to tire you out a little bit more. So could be helpful in that respect. And although it will physically tire us, actually kind of concentrating on something will be slightly mentally taxing as well. So gym before you go to bed, cardio before you go to bed could work really well. I think it might be working for me, but I'll let you know in a few weeks. So when I was doing all the research for these episodes, I came across a formula that is very, very simple, but I think it is a really helpful prompt to keep in mind. So the formula is in bed plus tired plus calm mind equals sleep. So essentially, it's just a prompt to remind us that we need to be in bed, we need to be tired, and we need to be calm in body and mind. And that is the thing that's going to get us to sleep. Actually signaling to yourself that you're winding down and getting ready to sleep is so important. And we've mentioned this in this episode and the last one. If you struggle with making yourself go to sleep, use that cutoff time that we talked about earlier and set an alarm to remind yourself for that cutoff time so you don't end up getting distracted or caught up in something else, which is absolutely me when I sit in here making music after work on an evening. And let's really get real with ourselves on this one as well. Are you watching way more Netflix? Are you watching loads of Netflix and it's really hard to pull yourself away? Or are you smashing TikToks for hours and hours before bed? Be really honest with yourself here, because you may have to make some sacrifices if you want your sleep to improve. You can't keep doing the same behaviors and expect to have different results and a better sleep outcome. And then the last thing to think about on this in-bed prompt is if you are someone that's leaving important tasks till super late in the day, so like life admin, work bits, prepping your lunch, try and get all your priority tasks boxed off and don't leave them so late that you end up staying up way later than you've planned. And then after those tasks, you then feel like you need another few hours to wind down. This is kind of, I guess, more of a productivity issue, but it all feeds into our sleep and into the way our brain is stimulated and the way it's running and winding down throughout the day. So the next part of the equation, which is tired. If you are having a nice full day and you're including things like exercise, you're getting regular daylight, you're cutting off caffeine, all of this is going to contribute to the level of tiredness that you feel at the end of the day. So as we spoke about a couple of minutes ago, for some people, hitting the gym, going home, showering, and passing out in bed is actually really helpful. So experiment with this. What makes you feel tired? Maybe if late gym isn't your flavor, but movement helps, you could think about more gentle forms of movement that feel calming. So like yoga, mobility, or stretching. I'm a big fan of the Pliability app because it's stretching, but there is an element of mindfulness to it. There's very calming music as well. It's almost like a cross between yin yoga and mobility and stretching in a sense. And I've been using that app for a while. I'm also a pliability athlete, so I'll put my affiliate link in the show notes, which gets you a couple of weeks free if anyone would like that. But that is something that has definitely helped me feel calm as a form of movement and helped me feel tired. They've even got a couple of sleep series on it, which is quite handy. So the last prompt as part of that equation is to calm the mind. Probably the hardest for all of us in this situation. So to begin with, we want to de-stress. So check in with yourself. If you are stressed, this is not going to help your sleep. So then we want to try and think about, how do we de-stress? And if you don't know what that looks like, start to experiment with things that might help you de-stress and unwind. And I have done a podcast episode about stress. So I'm actually going to look what episode number it is so I can tell you right now. Oh wow, it was really an early episode. So episode 7 of this podcast, stress busting and mastering your stress with coping strategies. So if you are a stressed person, get that one queued up after this and rinse all those tips for ideas about how you might de-stress yourself. So another part of calming the mind is obviously getting the thoughts out of our head. So we talked about how sometimes when we exercise, our brain might just tick and that's enough. But for some people, we might want to experiment with journaling. You might want to just use the notes in your phone or do a brain dump on a pen of paper next to your bed. We talk about this a lot on the podcast. Empty your brain out, similar to how you take the bin out every time it gets full. At the end of the day, we've had so much stimulation. Our brain is so full of all sorts, and we don't need that to go to sleep. So even if it just sounds like complete chaos, whatever you're writing down, get everything out. Leave it all in the journal, in the notes app, on the pen and paper. And that feeling of almost emptying your brain is, again, another really helpful prompt for you to eventually be able to wind down with. So in bed, tired, calm mind equals sleep. That's your formula. So there we have it. Sleep can be such a head fuck for so many of us with ADHD, and a lot of us have to work a lot harder at it. And that almost doesn't feel fair a lot of the time. And I know how frustrating that can be. I sometimes really reach the end of my tether with it and everything feels hopeless. But it is important that we stick at it and we keep trying to find things that work and keep aiming to nail the basics as consistently as we can to give ourselves the best possible chance of having good sleep. Some nights it's still going to be hard, even if we feel like we've found the magic formula, but it is to be expected. Some days our brains will just be overflowing and it's not as easy as just doing a bit of a brain dump, getting a warm shower and having a room at a good temperature. It's not always going to be easy, but we can do everything that we can to try and make it as accessible as possible for us to have a good night's sleep. And the one thing that I want you to remember is, if any of you are really, really struggling, make sure you reach out for support from your doctor, your GP. Let them know that you're struggling. If you are feeling so distressed by your lack of sleep, despite your sleep hygiene being in a really good spot, there may be more to it. So please do reach out to your doctor if you do need help. But I hope these episodes have been really handy and been a bit of food for thought when it comes to trying to figure out what sleep looks like for you. So leaving it there today. As always, any questions, drop them in the comments on YouTube, drop me a DM on Instagram. Let me know what's been helpful. We're nearing the middle of April now, and I think, as I mentioned last week, I have a couple of online coaching slots left. 2 went last week. I've got 2 more left. If anyone has been thinking about starting their coaching journey with me, if you want to have a chat about training, nutrition, and how I might be able to help you, hit the form in the show notes, tell me a little bit about yourself, and we'll have a chat. I'll let you know if I can help you and if Buzz Culture Club would be a good fit. And then if you want to get started, we will get you onboarded onto the team. So have an awesome rest of your week, Cultiv8 family. Take it easy. That is me out.